I found these journal entries on a corrupted flash drive in an abandoned ranger station in the Chekomenga Nikolai National Forest. The drive was military grade, partially melted. I've transcribed what I could recover. If anyone knows the identity of the author or the whereabouts of the other members of Echo Unit, please contact me. I've already tried reporting this to authorities, but they claim no record of such a unit exists. My name is Mason Ryder, and if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. That sounds melodramatic, but it's the reality of my situation. I should start by telling you that I lived in Colorado. The mountains were always my sanctuary, where I'd go hiking whenever I could escape the crushing reality of my financial situation. I loved photography, craft beer, and spending evenings watching the stars from my back porch with my dog, Rusty. Simple pleasures that kept me sane. 3 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. The insurance barely covered the funeral expenses, and I discovered they'd been underwater on their mortgage for years. I inherited their debt along with my own student loans. Then, I lost my job in environmental engineering when the company downsized. Within 6 months, I was facing bankruptcy, about to lose my house and desperate. That's when James Grayson found me. He approached me at a bar, a dingy place I'd never been to before. I was drowning my sorrows in the cheapest beer they had. Mason Ryder, he asked, sliding onto the stool next to mine. I nodded, suspicious but too defeated to care much. I represent a specialized government program. We need people with your particular skill set and background. I laughed bitterly. What skill set? Being unemployed and broke? Military experience? Environmental engineering degree? Wilderness survival training? No immediate family ties? He slid a folder across the bar. And we're aware of your financial situation. Inside the folder was a contract. The salary made my eyes widen, and there was a clause about immediate debt forgiveness upon signing. What's the catch? I asked, because there's always a catch. It's classified work. Dangerous. You'll be gone for long stretches, sometimes with no contact. You'll work with a team recovering missing persons in remote locations. Search and rescue? That doesn't sound classified. James's expression didn't change. These aren't ordinary missing persons cases. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. But when you're staring down financial ruin, rational thought takes a backseat to survival. I signed the contract that night. 2 days later, a black SUV picked me up from my house. I had time to pack one bag and say goodbye to Rusty, who I left with my neighbor. They promised he'd be well cared for. The SUV took me to a small airfield where I boarded a plane with blacked-out windows. There were 5 other recruits on board. We weren't allowed to speak to each other during the flight, which lasted about 3 hours. We landed at what appeared to be a military facility, though it bore no official markings. For 2 weeks, we underwent intensive training. That's where I met the rest of Echo Unit. Robert Jackson, our medic, had been an Army combat medic. Quiet, methodical, always carrying a worn copy of Gray's Anatomy that had belonged to his grandfather. Thomas Levi, communications specialist, former Navy, with an uncanny ability to fix any piece of technology with the most basic tools. Brooke Wade, our scout. She moved through forests like a ghost, never breaking a twig or leaving a trace. She never talked about her past, but her arms bore scars that looked like ritual markings. Logan Knox, weapons specialist. Built like a tank with hands the size of dinner plates, but he had the gentlest touch when handling his arsenal of specialized equipment. And our commanding officer, Captain William Chase. Cold blue eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. 20 years of Black Ops experience, according to the rumors. He never confirmed or denied anything about his past. On our last day of training, Captain Chase gathered us in a windowless briefing room. The walls were lined with maps of national forests across the United States. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level, he began. The program you've joined exists because standard search and rescue operations have a 98% failure rate in certain geographic locations. He clicked a remote, and red circles appeared on 5 areas of the map, regions in Michigan, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. Since 1965, approximately 1,500 people have vanished in these specific areas. No bodies recovered, no evidence of what happened to them. Serial killers? Thomas suggested. Animal attacks, I offered. Chase shook his head. We've ruled out conventional explanations. These disappearances follow patterns that defy rational explanation. Brooke spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. The people who live near these forests have stories. Legends, Chase nodded. Indigenous peoples avoided these areas for centuries. Early settlers reported strange occurrences. The government has been monitoring these zones since the 1940s, but in the last decade, the frequency of disappearances has increased dramatically. So what are we dealing with? Logan asked, his massive hands fidgeting with a tactical pen. We don't know, Chase admitted. That's why you're here. Your mission is to enter these zones, locate missing persons if possible, gather intelligence on whatever is causing these disappearances, and neutralize threats if necessary. Neutralize? Robert asked. How do we neutralize something if we don't know what it is? Something if we don't know what it is? Chase opened a metal case on the table. Inside were what looked like standard military sidearms, but with strange modifications. These weapons have been specially developed based on the limited information we have. The briefing continued for hours. We were shown photographs of missing persons, given specialized equipment, and warned repeatedly about the dangers we would face. One last thing, Chase said as we prepared to leave. Whatever you think you know about the natural world, whatever you believe is or isn't possible, Gichu meant possible. Leave those preconceptions here. Where you're going, the rules are different. Our first deployment was to the Huron-Manistee National Forest in Michigan. 4 hikers had vanished 3 days earlier. John Caleb, Henry Jace, Frank Easton, and George Clint. All experienced outdoorsmen who had been on a weekend camping trip. We were dropped by helicopter at the edge of the search zone as dusk approached, against standard SAR protocol, which avoids nighttime operations. But Chase insisted that was when we'd have the best chance of finding something. As the helicopter lifted off, I felt the forest watching us. That sounds paranoid, I know, but there was a palpable sense of awareness in the air, as if the trees themselves were taking note of our presence. We set up a base camp and prepared for our first night reconnaissance. Each of us was equipped with night vision, thermal imaging, and a specialized radio that supposedly would work even in areas where conventional communications failed. Stay within visual contact, Chase ordered. If you see something unusual, report it immediately. I repeat, do not investigate alone. We moved out in a standard search pattern with Brooke taking point, Logan covering our rear. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No insects, no rustling of nocturnal animals, just the sound of our boots on the leaf-strewn ground and our own breathing. An hour into the search, Thomas stopped suddenly, adjusting his headset. I'm picking up something, he whispered. We all stopped to listen. Through our own headsets came a faint sound. Someone whistling a tune I vaguely recognized but couldn't place. That's Home on the Range, Robert said. My grandfather used to whistle that. Direction? Chase demanded. Thomas pointed northeast. Signals weak but clear. Could be one of the missing hikers, I suggested. Chase nodded. We investigate, but we stay together. We altered our course following the whistling. It remained at the same volume regardless of how far we walked, always seeming to come from just ahead of us. After 20 minutes, we entered a small clearing. The whistling stopped abruptly. In the center of the clearing stood a single pine tree, taller and older than those surrounding it. At its base was a backpack, clearly belonging to a hiker. Logan approached it cautiously, scanning the area with his thermal imager. No heat signatures except ours. Chase motioned for Robert to check the backpack. Inside, he found a wallet belonging to John Caleb, one of our missing hikers. Everything was intact. Money, credit cards, ID. Also in the pack was a journal, a water filter, some energy bars, and camping equipment. Why would he leave his pack? I asked. Maybe he didn't, Brooke said, pointing to the ground around the tree. There were no footprints other than our own, despite the soft, impressionable soil. It's like it was placed here, Thomas said, like someone wanted us to find it. As he said this, the whistling started again, now coming from behind us. We turned in unison. Nothing was there. Nothing was there. Form a perimeter, Chase ordered, his voice tense. Back to back. We moved into position, weapons drawn, scanning the darkness beyond the clearing. The whistling circled us, seemingly coming from all directions at once, then from directly above. I looked up at the ancient pine. Something moved among its branches, a darkness deeper than the night sky, shifting like oil on water. For an instant, I thought I saw eyes, dozens of them, reflecting our lights back at us. "Contact," I shouted, raising my weapon. Chase grabbed my arm. "Hold fire," he hissed. "We don't engage unless directly threatened." The shape in the tree seemed to fold in on itself, becoming smaller and denser, until it resembled a human silhouette. Then it spoke. "Why have you come to our woods, soldiers?" The voice was male, elderly, with an accent I couldn't place, like multiple dialects layered on top of each other. Chase stepped forward. "We're looking for missing hikers, 4 men who were camping in this area." A sound like dry branches breaking. It took me a moment to realize it was laughter. "They trespassed. They took from us. They did not ask permission." "Took what?" Chase asked. "Life," the voice answered. "They killed without need, without respect." Brooke whispered. "The hunters? They were here for deer season." The shape seemed to nod. "The 4-legged ones are under our protection." "Where are the men now?" Chase pressed. "Learning respect," came the reply. "As you will if you remain." The whistling began again, louder now, joined by other whistlers hidden in the darkness around us. Different tunes overlapping discordant. "We should leave," Thomas said, his hand shaking as he adjusted his radio. "Now." Logan nodded agreement. "This isn't right, Captain." Chase stood his ground. "We have a mission. These men have families waiting for them." "Had families waiting for them." "Had families," the voice corrected. "They belong to the forest now." Without warning, the lights on our equipment flickered and died. Night vision, thermal, everything electronic went dark simultaneously. Only our flashlights still worked, casting weak beams into the suddenly impenetrable night. "Fall back to base camp," Chase ordered. "Defensive formation." We began to retreat, moving as one unit, watching all directions. The whistling followed us, sometimes near, sometimes far, joined by other sounds, snapping twigs, rustling leaves, and occasionally what sounded like footsteps running parallel to our position. Halfway back to camp, Thomas froze. "Wait," he said. "This isn't the way we came." He was right. The path ahead was unfamiliar, narrower with denser undergrowth than the route we'd taken into the forest. "We're on course," Chase insisted, checking his compass. "Due south." But the compass needle was spinning wildly, never settling on a direction. "We're being led," Brooke said quietly. "It's what they do. They confuse you, lead you deeper until you're lost." "Who's they?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her expression told me she knew more than she was saying. We pushed on, trying to maintain our original heading as best we could without working compasses. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching like fingers to snag our clothing, roots rising from the ground to trip us. After what felt like hours, we emerged into another clearing, identical to the first, down to the ancient pine tree in the center. "Impossible," Logan muttered. We've been walking in a straight line. The backpack was still there, but now joined by 3 others, arranged in a perfect circle around the tree. "All 4 packs," Robert confirmed after a quick check. But no sign of the owners. The whistling had stopped. The forest was completely silent again. Then from the branches of the pine, something fell, landing with a wet thud at Chase's feet. It was a human ear. Chase didn't flinch. "Form up, we're leaving now." As he spoke, more objects began to fall from the tree. Fingers, toes, what looked like strips of skin. None showed signs of being cut or torn. They appeared to have simply detached. We backed away, weapons raised despite Chase's earlier order not to fire. The parts continued to fall, faster now, bouncing and rolling across the ground toward us. "Run!" "Toward us. Run!" Brooke whispered. "Run now." For once, Chase didn't argue. Back the way we came. Double time. We ran, flashlight beams bouncing wildly across the trail. Behind us, the sound of something large moving through the forest. Branches breaking, undergrowth being crushed under significant weight. Thomas was the first to fall, his foot catching on a root that I swear moved to trip him. He went down hard, his flashlight spinning away into the darkness. I turned back for him, grabbing his arm to pull him up. "Leave me," he gasped, his face contorted in pain. "Ankles broken." "Ankles broken?" "No man left behind," I replied, hauling him to his feet. Logan appeared on his other side, and together we half carried, half dragged him as we continued to flee. The pursuing sound grew louder, closer. With each labored step, I expected to feel claws or teeth in my back. Instead, we burst unexpectedly into our base camp, the tents still standing exactly as we'd left them. Chase immediately began breaking down equipment, barking orders to call for emergency extraction. The radios are still dead, Robert reported. Use the emergency beacon, Chase commanded. Logan activated the device, a last resort signal that would bring in a rapid extraction team, no questions asked. As we waited, we formed a defensive circle, backs to the center, watching the surrounding forest. No one spoke. The only sound was Thomas's pain breathing as Robert splinted his ankle. The extraction team arrived 30 minutes later, a Black Hawk helicopter descending into the small clearing beside our camp, rotors whipping the air into a frenzy. As we boarded, I looked back at the forest line. Among the trees, I could make out shapes, human-like but wrong somehow, too tall, too thin, watching us with reflected eyes that caught the helicopter's lights. One of them raised a hand in what might have been a wave or a warning. The last thing I saw as we lifted off was that hand pointing directly at me, a single finger extended as if to say, "We'll see you again." Back at headquarters, our debriefing lasted 6 hours. We described everything in exhaustive detail. Chase insisted we had encountered some kind of cult forest dwellers who used psychological tactics and hallucinogens to disorient trespassers. The official report listed the 4 hikers as still missing, presumed deceased. Search operations in the area were suspended indefinitely. That night, alone in my bunk, I heard whistling outside my window. Home on the range, the same tune from the forest. When I looked out, there was nothing there except the wind in the trees. But I knew better. They had followed us home. And this was only the beginning. 2 weeks after Michigan, we were deployed to the Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. Another disappearance, a family of 4 this time. Father, mother, 2 teenage children vanished while camping near a lake that locals called the Mirror. Chase briefed us on the flight. The family, the Axels, had been missing for just 36 hours, a faster response time than our previous mission, which he hoped would yield better results. "We're changing protocols," he announced. "Daylight operations only. No splitting up for any reason." No one argued. The events in Michigan had changed us all. Thomas was still on medical leave with his broken ankle, replaced temporarily by Aiden Finn, a former Green Beret with a quiet intensity that bordered on unsettling. As the helicopter approached the drop zone, I studied the landscape below. Mount Hood loomed in the distance, its snow-capped peak gleaming in the morning sun. The forest stretched for miles in every direction, dense and primeval. "There's the lake," Logan pointed out as we circled. The Mirror lived up to its name, a perfect oval of water that reflected the sky with such clarity it was difficult to see where reality ended and reflection began. We landed in a meadow half a mile from the lake. The Axels' campsite was supposed to be on the eastern shore. As we disembarked, Brooke immediately tensed. "Something's wrong here," she said, scanning the tree line. "What is it?" Chase demanded. She shook her head. "Not sure yet, but the forest feels expectant." I knew what she meant. There was a hushed quality to the air, like an audience waiting for a performance to begin. We moved out in tight formation, approaching the lake from the south. Unlike Michigan, this forest was alive with sound. Birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. Normal, except for how it all seemed to pause momentarily when we passed, then resume once we were by. The Axels' campsite was undisturbed, tent still pitched, cooking equipment laid out beside a cold fire pit, fishing gear stacked neatly against a tree. A family SUV was parked on a dirt track nearby, keys still in the ignition. Same pattern as Michigan, Robert observed. No signs of struggle or panic. They just walked away. We began a standard search pattern, expanding outward from the campsite. Aiden discovered footprints leading from the tent to the lakeshore. 4 sets, 2 large adults, 2 smaller teenagers. The prints ended at the water's edge. "They went swimming," Logan suggested. Chase shook his head. "No swimwear missing from their bags. All their clothes are accounted for." "So they walked into the lake fully dressed?" I asked. No one had an answer. We followed the shoreline, looking for where they might have exited the water. We found nothing. It was as if they had walked in and never came out. By midday, we had circled the entire lake without finding any trace of the family beyond those initial footprints. "We need to check the water," Chase decided. None of us liked that idea, but our equipment included diving gear for just such a contingency. Logan and I were selected for the dive, while the others maintained a perimeter around the lake. The water was cold but remarkably clear. Visibility extended at least 30 feet in all directions. The lake was deeper than it appeared from shore, dropping off sharply about 10 yards out to a depth of about 60 feet. Logan and I descended slowly, sweeping our lights across the lake bed. There were no bodies, no clothing, nothing to indicate anyone had drowned here. Just silt, rocks, and the occasional fish darting away from our lights. Then I saw it, a reflection that shouldn't have been there. Near the center of the lake, at its deepest point, something was giving off a dull gleam. I signaled to Logan, and we swam toward it. As we got closer, I could make out a rectangular shape half buried in the silt, about the size of a small door. Logan reached it first. Using his dive knife, he scraped away the silt covering the object. It was a metal hatch, like something you'd find on a submarine, complete with a wheel handle in the center. We exchanged a look through our masks. This was impossible. There shouldn't be a hatch at the bottom of a natural lake in the middle of a national forest. Logan gestured, questioning whether we should try to open it. I shook my head and pointed up. We needed to report this to Chase first. As we began our ascent, I glanced back down. The silt we had disturbed was settling, and in the clearing water, I saw that the hatch had writing on it, not in English, not in any alphabet I recognized. We broke the surface and swam to shore, where the others were waiting anxiously. "You were down there a long time," Chase said. "Find anything." Find anything. We described the hatch. Chase's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "You're sure it was a hatch? Not a geological formation or debris?" "Positive," Logan affirmed. "Man-made, relatively recent construction, maybe military, but not ours," I added. "The markings weren't any language I've ever seen." Chase was silent for a moment. "Then we're going back down. All of us this time." Brooke looked at the water, her face pale. "Captain, with respect, I don't think that's a good idea." "Noted," Chase replied coldly. "Gear up." Within 20 minutes, we were all underwater, descending toward the center of the lake. Chase led, followed by Aiden, then Robert, Brooke, Logan, and myself bringing up the rear. The hatch was still there, more visible now that we had cleared away some of the silt. Chase examined it carefully, running his gloved hand over the strange markings. They seemed to shift under his touch, rearranging themselves into new patterns. He motioned for us to move back, then grabbed the wheel handle and tried to turn it. It resisted at first, then suddenly gave way with a grinding sound that was audible even underwater. Chase pulled and the hatch swung open with surprising ease, revealing a dark vertical shaft descending into the earth. A faint light glowed far below, far below. He switched on his helmet light and peered into the opening. After a moment, he signaled his intention to enter the shaft. Brooke grabbed his arm, shaking her head emphatically. Chase pulled free and pointed upward, in order for her to return to the surface if she wasn't willing to follow. She hesitated, then fell back into position behind Aiden. One by one, we entered the shaft. It was wider than it had appeared, easily accommodating our bulky diving gear. The walls were smooth, almost polished, with more of the strange markings etched into the surface. We descended for what felt like an impossible distance, much deeper than the lake itself. The water temperature rose steadily, becoming uncomfortably warm. Finally, we reached another hatch. This one was already open, leading into a horizontal tunnel. The tunnel was only half filled with water, leaving an airspace above. Chase surfaced in this air pocket and removed his regulator. "Air's breathable," he announced after taking an experimental breath. "Oxygen levels normal." We all removed our masks and regulators, but kept the tanks on our backs. The tunnel stretched ahead of us, dimly lit by some unknown source that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a pale blue-green glow that reminded me of bioluminescent algae. "What is this place?" Robert whispered. "Not our concern right now," Chase replied. "We're here for the axles. We're here for the axles." We waded forward, the water level gradually decreasing until we were on dry ground. The tunnel widened into a circular chamber with 7 additional tunnels branching off in different directions. In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and on it, a small wooden box. "Nobody touch anything," Chase ordered, but Aiden was already approaching the pedestal. "There are pictures," he said, pointing to the box. "Look." We gathered around. On top of the box were 4 photographs. The missing Axel family, each picture showing one family member smiling directly at the camera. They appeared to have been taken recently, perhaps even since their disappearance. "This doesn't make sense," Logan muttered. "Who brought these down here?" More importantly, I added, who took them? Brooke had backed away from the pedestal and was examining the tunnel entrances. These markings above the tunnels, she called out. Their names. What names? What names? Chase asked. Our names, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Huh? Each tunnel has one of our names. We spread out to look. Sure enough, above each tunnel entrance was a symbol that somehow, inexplicably, I recognized as my own name. Not in English, not in any written language I knew, but undeniably mine. What the hell is going on? Logan demanded, staring at his own tunnel. Chase's jaw was tight. We're leaving. Now. No one argued. We turned back toward the flooded tunnel we had entered through. It was gone. Where the entrance had been was now just a solid wall, with no sign there had ever been an opening. That's not possible, Robert said, pressing his hands against the wall. We just came through here. Spread out, Chase ordered. Find another way out. We began searching the chamber for hidden exits or mechanisms that might reopen our entry point. There was nothing. Captain, Aiden called from the pedestal. The box is open now. We hadn't touched it, but the wooden box had indeed opened, revealing its contents. 7 small figurines, each a crude representation of a human form, made from what looked like twisted roots or vines. Each figurine had a small cloth tag tied around its neck. Aiden leaned closer to read the tags. There are names, he said. Each figurine has one of our names. Before Chase could stop him, Aiden picked up the figurine with his name. Tia. As his fingers closed around it, he gasped sharply, his body going rigid. Aiden, Chase shouted, reaching for him. Aiden's eyes rolled back in his head, and he began speaking in a voice that wasn't his own, higher with that same unplaceable accent we had heard in Michigan. The rules are simple, the voice said using Aiden's mouth. Each must take the path that bears their name. Those who reach the surface may leave with what they came for. Those who don't, remain. What did you do to the family? Chase demanded. Aiden's head tilted at an unnatural angle. They are where they chose to be, as you will be. His body convulsed once violently and then he collapsed. Robert rushed to his side, checking his vitals. He's alive, Robert reported, but his pulse is erratic. Aiden's eyes fluttered open, but they were distant, unfocused. I saw them, he whispered. The axles, they're here, but they're changing. Changing how? Chase pressed. Becoming like them, like the Watchers. Aiden struggled to sit up. We need to go, now. Not without the family, Chase insisted. Aiden grabbed Chase's wrist, his grip desperate. They don't want to leave, Captain. They chose to stay. Chase pulled free. That's not their choice to make. We have a mission. Our mission is impossible, Brooke said quietly. These are the Watchers' woods. Their rules. Whose rules? I asked. What are the Watchers? The old ones? The old ones. The first ones. She looked around at the tunnels. They were here before us and they'll be here after. They guard the wild places. You knew about them, Chase accused. Before we ever started these missions. She nodded slowly. My grandmother was taken by them when I was a child. She returned. Yeah, different. She told me about them. No one believed her. They said she was insane. These tunnels are our only option now. Chase looked at each of us in turn, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, we follow their rules for now. Each takes their designated tunnel. Keep your radios on. If you find an exit or the family, report immediately. And if we don't? I asked. Then we meet back here in 2 hours, no matter what. We gathered our equipment, checking weapons and lights. Chase distributed the figurines to each of us. I took mine reluctantly, half expecting to be possessed as Aiden had. Nothing happened when I touched it, but the small wooden form seemed to pulse slightly in my hand, like it had its own heartbeat. 2 hours, Chase repeated. No heroics. If you find an exit, take it and call for extraction. We split up, each heading for our assigned tunnel. Mine sloped gently upward, its walls covered in the same glowing symbols. The air grew cooler as I ascended, giving me hope that I was indeed heading toward the surface. After walking for about 20 minutes, I reached a fork in the tunnel. Both paths looked identical. I tried the radio, but there was only static. I stood there uncertain until I felt the figurine in my pocket move. Taking it out, I saw that its left arm had risen, pointing to the left passage. I hesitated, then decided to trust it. The alternative was blind guessing. The left tunnel narrowed significantly, forcing me to crouch and eventually crawl. The glowing symbols provided just enough light to see a few feet ahead. The air became thicker, harder to breathe, with a sweet rotting smell that made my stomach turn. Just as I was considering turning back, the tunnel opened into a small cave. In the center was a pool of black water, perfectly still, reflecting the glowing symbols on the ceiling. Beside the pool sat a girl of about 16, one of the Axel children, according to the photographs I had seen. She was humming softly, trailing her fingers through the black water. "Olivia?" I said, remembering her name from the briefing. She looked up, smiling. Her eyes reflected the light like an animal's. "You came," she said. "The watcher said someone—" "I'm here to take you home," I told her, approaching slowly. Her smile faded. "I am home. Your real home," I insisted. "Your family must be worried." She laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the cave. "My family is here. We're all here. Where can you take me to them?" She nodded, standing. "They're waiting. They want to meet you." I followed her around the pool to another tunnel entrance I hadn't noticed before. This one was larger, its walls smooth and dry. "How did you end up here?" I asked as we walked. "We were camping," she said, her voice dreamy. "Dad saw lights on the lake at night. We went to look. The water opened. We could breathe underwater somehow. Then we found the tunnels." She glanced back at me. "The Watchers showed us what we could become. What does that mean?" She didn't answer, just kept walking. The tunnel eventually opened into an enormous cavern, so large I couldn't see the other side. The ceiling was lost in darkness above, but the floor was illuminated by thousands of the glowing symbols arranged in complex, swirling patterns. In the center of the cavern stood 3 figures that I recognized as the rest of the Axel family. But something was wrong with them. Their proportions were off. Limbs too long, torsos too thin. Their skin had a faint luminescence like the symbols on the walls. Behind them, partially hidden in shadows, were taller figures, much taller, at least 9 feet high, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed slightly too large for their bodies. Their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. The Watchers. "Mom, Dad," Olivia called out. I brought one." Mr. Axel turned toward me. His face was still recognizably human, but his features had begun to shift, cheekbones higher, jaw longer, eyes larger. "Welcome," he said, his voice containing the same layered quality I had heard before. "Have you come to join us?" "I've come to bring you home," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Axel made a sound like wind through trees. "We are home. Finally, truly home." The second child, a boy of about 14, stepped forward. Unlike his parents and sister, he seemed frightened, his eyes darting between me and the Watchers. "Help me," he whispered. "Please, they won't let me leave." One of the Watchers moved with impossible speed, placing a long-fingered hand on the boy's shoulder. He flinched but fell silent. "Daniel is still adjusting," Mr. Axel explained. "The transformation is difficult at first." "Transformation into what?" I asked. "Into what we were always meant to be," Mrs. Axel answered. "The Watchers have been waiting for us, for humans who could hear their call, who could become like them." "They're ancient," Olivia added eagerly. "They've watched over the forests since before humans existed, but they're dying out. They need new blood." I was backing away slowly, reaching for my weapon. "You can't stay here. Your son doesn't want this." "Daniel will understand in time," Mr. Axel said. "And as will you." "I'm leaving," I stated firmly, "and I'm taking Daniel with me." The Watchers moved forward as one, their movements fluid and unnervingly fast. They made no sound, but I could feel their anger like a physical pressure against my skin. "No one leaves without permission," Mrs. Axel said, her voice hardening. "Those are the rules." My hand closed around the figurine in my pocket. It was hot now, almost burning against my fingers. On impulse, I pulled it out and held it up. "I have this. It led me here." The Watchers froze. One of them made a sound like distant thunder. "The token," Olivia whispered. "They gave you a token." Mr. Axel nodded slowly. "The rules must be honored. You may leave with one." "Daniel," I said immediately. "I choose Daniel." The boy's eyes widened with hope. The Watcher behind him tightened its grip, but another made a gesture, and it reluctantly released him. Daniel ran to my side, trembling. I put an arm around his shoulders, keeping the figurine raised in my other hand. "How do we get out?" "How do we get out?" I demanded. Mrs. Axel pointed to a tunnel entrance behind us, one that hadn't been there moments before. "That will lead you to the surface," she said. "But remember, only one. If you try to return for the others, the way will be closed forever." I looked at Daniel, then at his family. They were watching us with expressions that mixed sadness, resignation, and something else. Hunger, perhaps. The watchers loomed behind them, patient and ancient. "I'm sorry," I said to the boy. "About your family. They're not my family anymore," he replied, his voice breaking. "Not really." His voice breaking. We backed toward the tunnel, keeping the figurine raised until we were inside. Then we ran. The tunnel sloped steeply upward, twisting and turning but always climbing. After what felt like hours, we saw natural light ahead. Pale and gray, but unmistakably daylight. We emerged into a forest clearing about a mile from where the lake should have been, but there was no lake, just more trees. "It moves," Daniel explained, seeing my confusion. "The lake. It's not always in the same place." I tried my radio, and to my surprise it worked. I called for extraction, reporting that I had found one of the missing persons. While we waited for the helicopter, Daniel told me more about the Watchers, how they had existed for millennia in the deep forests of the world, guardians of nature who had once been worshipped as gods by ancient peoples. Tangas, bah. How they were dying out, their numbers dwindling as humans encroached on their territories, how they had found a way to transform certain humans, those with a specific genetic marker, apparently, into their own kind. We all had the marker except me. Mine was incomplete, they said. That's why they couldn't change me like the others. So they were just going to keep you prisoner? He nodded. Until they decided what to do with me. The helicopter arrived 30 minutes later. As we lifted off, I looked down at the forest below. For an instant, I thought I saw tall figures moving among the trees watching us go. Back at base, Daniel was taken into protective custody. I was debriefed extensively, then ordered to wait for news of the others. Logan and Robert emerged from the forest 3 hours after me, having found their way out through their respective tunnels. They had seen no sign of the Axles or the Watchers. Brooke came out an hour later, disoriented and exhausted. She reported encountering what she called guardians. Not the Watchers themselves, but creatures that served them, animals that walked like men. Aiden was found unconscious near the original campsite, with no memory of how he had gotten there or what had happened after we separated. Chase never came back. After 48 hours, a search was conducted of the area. No trace of him was found, no lake either, just miles of unbroken forest. The mission was classified as a partial success. 1 civilian recovered, 1 operative lost. Echo Unit was placed on stand-down for 2 weeks for psychological evaluation and rest. That night, alone in my quarters, I took out the wooden figurine I had kept hidden from the debrief team. It no longer moved or felt warm. It was just a crude carving now, but I knew what it represented. A key, a token, a promise. The Watchers weren't done with us, and somewhere in those tunnels, Captain Chase was either dead or becoming something that had never been human to begin with. Our next deployment would be to the forests of Wisconsin. I didn't know what waited for us there, but I knew we were moving deeper into their world with each mission. The worst part was, I wasn't sure we were meant to stop them. What if we were just helping them select new recruits? What if we were being tested ourselves? We were given a new captain after Oregon, Edward Blaze Hunter, a former Delta operator with a reputation for unorthodox tactics and absolute loyalty to his team. The brass told us he had experience with unconventional threats, though they wouldn't elaborate. Hunter reviewed our previous mission reports extensively before meeting with us. When he finally called us together, his first question wasn't about tactics or procedures. "Do you believe what you saw?" he asked bluntly. We exchanged glances. After a long moment, Logan spoke up. "With respect, sir, what we believe doesn't change what happened." Hunter nodded slowly. "Fair answer, but I need to know where each of you stands. If we're going into these woods again, I need to know who's with me." "What does that mean, sir?" Robert asked. "It means there are 2 ways to look at these missions," Hunter replied. 1, we're dealing with some kind of mass hallucination possibly caused by environmental factors or psychological warfare. 2, there really are ancient entities in these forests that can break the laws of physics as we understand them. "Which do you believe, sir?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "I believe we're being sent to do a job that someone higher up doesn't expect us to survive." five, 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 that's 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 silent life, 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 that's silence dive, 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 that silence does life, 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 that silence does. Took their time. I scanned the other names, recognizing none until, Captain, I said, my voice tight. Look, near the bottom of the trunk, partially obscured by undergrowth, was another name. William Chase. Hunter crouched to examine it. Your former co, he confirmed. The carving looks recent. Before I could respond, Brooke called from the other side of the clearing. Movement in the trees, multiple contacts. We regrouped instantly, forming a defensive circle in the center of the clearing. Hunter ordered weapons ready but held fire unless directly threatened. From the forest emerged the missing students, all 5 of them walking in perfect unison, their movements unnaturally smooth. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, regarding us with blank expressions. Identify yourselves, Hunter ordered. One of the male students stepped forward. We are the Watcher's voice, he said, his tone flat and emotionless. You trespass in their sacred place. We're here for you, Hunter replied, to take you home. The student's head tilted at an odd angle. We are home, as your Captain Chase has chosen to be. Where is Chase? Hunter demanded. Becoming, another student answered. A female with long dark hair, as we are becoming, as you may become if worthy. Hunter's expression hardened. We're leaving, and you're coming with us. The students laughed in unison, a chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. You misunderstand, the first student said. You were not sent to rescue us. You were sent as offerings. Offerings for what? I asked. For the renewal, the female student replied. The forests are dying. The Watchers grow weak. They need new guardians. Hunter signaled us to tighten formation. Fall back slowly toward the trail, he murmured. Maintain visual on all contacts. We began to retreat, step by careful step. The students watched but made no move to follow. Captain Hunter, called the female student. They have a message for you specifically. Hunter paused. What message? For you specifically? Hunter paused. They know why you were chosen for this mission. They know what you did in Venezuela. Hunter's face drained of color. That's classified information. Nothing is hidden from the Watchers, she replied. They offer you absolution, a chance to atone. For a moment, I thought Hunter might break formation and approach them. Then he shook his head sharply. Move out, he ordered. Double time. We quickened our pace, backing away from the clearing. The students remained motionless, watching us go. Just before we entered the forest, the female student called out one last time. You'll be back, Captain. They've marked you already. Once we were a safe distance from the clearing, Hunter called a halt. New plan, he announced. We're not leaving without Chase. Sir, Logan objected, with respect, we don't even know if he's still alive. Those students are alive, Hunter countered. Changed, but alive. If they know about certain operations, they must have access to Chase's memories. So what's the plan? I asked. Hunter hesitated, then said, We use their rules against them. They want offerings? We'll give them one. You can't be serious, Robert protested. Not a real offering, Hunter clarified. A Trojan horse. One of us goes involuntarily wearing full surveillance gear. The rest track and prepare for extraction once we locate Chase and the students. Who's the volunteer? Brooke asked quietly. Hunter met my eyes. Ryder, you've encountered them twice and survived. They know you. And you had that token thing in Oregon. I still had the wooden figurine, though I hadn't told Hunter about it. Something in his expression made me think he knew anyway. You want me to let them take me, I said. At the first sign of real danger, we extract you. And if they detect the surveillance equipment, Robert asked. Then we go to Plan B, Hunter replied. Full tactical assault on whatever we find. None of us liked the plan, but no one had a better alternative. We spent the rest of the day preparing. I was fitted with miniaturized cameras and microphones, all designed to look like standard equipment. A subdermal tracker was injected into my forearm. That night, I returned to the clearing alone. The others established a hidden observation post 200 yards away, close enough to respond quickly if needed. The clearing was different at night. The great oak seemed to glow faintly, the carved names illuminated from within. The air was completely still, unnaturally quiet. I stood before the tree waiting. Nothing happened for several minutes. Then from behind the tree a figure emerged, Captain Chase. He looked surprisingly normal, though thinner than I remembered, his uniform tattered and dirty. His eyes reflected the faint light like an animal's. Mason, he said, his voice hoarse as if from disuse. You came back. For you, Captain, I replied. We're here to bring you home. He smiled sadly. There is no home anymore. Not for me. Not for any of us. What happened to you? Chase circled the tree slowly, trailing his fingers over the carved names. I was shown the truth about what we're really doing here. About what's happening to the world. And what is that? He stopped, looking up at the canopy above. The balance is breaking. Humans have taken too much, destroyed too much. The old guardians are dying. Without them, the wild places will fall. And when they fall, humanity follows. So these watchers, they're recruiting? Chase nodded. Selecting those with the right qualities, the right genetics, people who can become like them. And the students? You? In transition? He turned to face me directly. The process has already begun in me. In them. It can't be reversed. I took a step closer. You don't know that. Let us try to help you. He laughed softly. You still don't understand. I chose this, Mason. I carved my name willingly. From the shadows beyond the clearing, more figures appeared, the 5 students, moving with that same unnatural grace. Behind them, taller shapes remained half hidden among the trees. The Watchers. They want to meet you properly, Chase said. Without your surveillance devices. My heart sank. They knew. Don't worry about your team, Chase continued, as if reading my thoughts. They won't be harmed if they don't interfere. One of the students approached, the female who had spoken to Hunter earlier. Remove them, she instructed. All